Well, good morning, everyone. So for this morning, we wanted to start off with a research summary. We do a lot of work here at SMBSC throughout the year, and we just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of some of the work that we've been doing. So myself, David Mettler, I'm the research agronomist. Neil Olson will be joining me as the production agronomist, giving part of the presentation, and then Mark Bloomquist, the research director. For my part of the presentation, I'm going to be covering 4 nutrient management trials, and we're going to try to keep it somewhat short here. So I'm going to cover 4 trials in 20 minutes. There's going to be stuff that I don't get into, but all this information will be in our research reports on the website here the next week or so. So for the first trial I want to talk about is our crop rotation trial. The objective of this trial was to provide previous crop and nitrogen management recommendations for the growing area. For our previous crops that were planted in 2021, we had field corn, soybean, sweet corn, and spring wheat. You can see the planting dates here. And then for harvest, we also have the harvest dates. For our spring wheat, our field corn, and soybean, we had them harvested with a small plot combine. And then for the sweet corn, we harvested that by hand, taking the center 2 rows of each plot, 20 feet in each row, and getting a weight on that. So you can see our yield here. We have decent yield. If you remember from 2021, it was a little bit of a drought. So the field corn was a little on the low side, but that wasn't abnormal for that area. We also took residual nitrogen tests in the fall. For each of the previous crops, you can see the residual N from 0 to 4 feet. And each of these crops were planted in blocks that were 55 feet wide. And you can kind of see here in the picture there. And in the next year, what we did was we applied different rates of nitrogen based upon the residual N of each individual crop. We applied that as broadcast urea in the spring and incorporated it with a field cultivator. And again, this was in 2021, and then we moved into 2022, and we planted sugar beets across this whole trial. So if we look at the previous crops up here, we analyze this as a factorial. So we have previous crop, and that is analyzed across 3 nitrogen rates, so they're combined together in this factorial. Just looking at the yield data here, we have the sugar tons per acre. We have the equation going through to get our ESA. We can see that there's not a huge difference here in sugar, other than our spring wheat was a little bit lower. So that might look a little different from what some of you are expecting if you do grow wheat. We've generally seen a benefit to following sugar beets after wheat. And for 2022, as I said, it was very dry. We let that wheat regrow after harvest in 21, right? So going into 22, I believe that we took up a lot of that moisture, and we had a dry planting. And I think that we actually hurt our stand, right, with that dry conditions for those plots. And actually the residual nitrogen was lower than the other crops also, so we put on more nitrogen to get up to our recommended rates. And we've seen in our nitrogen rate trials that we've impacted our stand with higher rates of urea in the spring. So we had a low stand there, and that may have impacted our percent sugar for the spring wheat. We look at tons per acre, very similar again for most of the crops other than sweet corn. We have an increase in tons per acre for the sweet corn. And that carries over to looking at our ESA with the sweet corn, the sugar beets following sweet corn having a higher extractable sugar per acre. So our 3 rates of nitrogen that we used in this trial were the residual N, so that was dependent upon which crop the sugar beets were following, but this is an average of the 4 crops. And then we fertilized with that spring urea up to 110 pounds per acre, and then up to 150 pounds per acre. And again, this is averaged across the 4 crops for those nitrogen rates. So for the sugar content, we can see that we had a little bit of a decrease as we went up in nitrogen rate. Not significantly from the residual to 110, but we dropped a little bit from the 110 to 150. And we can see also that we had an increase in our tons per acre going from the residual to the next nitrogen rate, the 110, but no significant difference between the 110 to 150. And again, that carries over to having a significant difference in our ESA, with the check having significantly lower extractable sugar per acre. So this is generally something that we've seen in the agronomic database and just observations from the growers, that following canning crops such as peas and sweet corn have been beneficial to the following sugar beet crop. And we've also heard similar things with the wheat. So that's one reason why we initiated this trial. And that, you know, somewhat proved through in this trial in 1 year anyway, that the previous crop of sweet corn did really well, increasing our tons per acre. However, again, we have that potential issue with the wheat, but we're going to be doing this trial again in 2023. We already planned the rotational crops in 2022, and we'll be going into that trial here in 2023. So we'll hopefully have another data set for you there. The only other thing here to point out is that the sweet corn actually did not increase in tons per acre from the residual nitrogen rate to the 110. It had a 76-pound soil test in the fall, and it didn't actually benefit from adding any additional nitrogen. And we also saw a little bit of a decrease on over fertilizing across the trial when you went from 110 to 150. Okay, so the next trial that I'm going to talk about is our corn following unharvested beets. You may have heard me talk about this trial a few times over the last couple of years. This is actually our 4th year of conducting the trial. So the research objective for this trial is to determine best management practices if you're going to be planting field corn following unharvested sugar beets. So what we did for this trial was we located an area that would be suitable for putting in a trial in 2021. And we asked the grower to leave us a small area that we flagged out to conduct our trial. We went into the fall and we harvested certain plots out here. Some of them are unharvested and some of them are harvested for this comparison. We went out there with our research lifter and took those beets off the field. And then we did that by defoliating everything, lifted the plots we wanted to, and then we just left the beets there, right? We didn't do any tillage or anything in the fall. In the following spring, we applied our fertilizer rates with broadcast urea, incorporated with the field cultivator, planted on May 27th, so a little bit later, but as you know, we had a really wet spring this year, so it worked out. We harvested October 12th. That was a hand harvested trial. We harvested the center 2 rows of each plot, 20 feet in each row, and then we brought those samples to the U of M to be shelled and analyzed. This is a drone image taken on July 1st. You can see some differences in our plots, with the plot right here being a little bit less canopy there. That's our check. And you can see a little bit of difference in some of the other plots as well. But this is common among the trials that we've conducted over the last couple of years, is that we'd see differences in canopy height, color on that, at least in visual there. So this is our yield data from 2022. Very similar to other years. You see our treatments here. The beets, we have first 6 treatments that were not harvested, so beets were left out in the field. Then we have the last 3 treatments, 7 through 9, and 4 harvested. Also had a starter. We had some checks with no starter. Most of them had a starter. And then we had our nitrogen rate differences. So we took a University of Minnesota recommendation across the not harvested beet plots. We had the recommended rate minus 40 pounds, the recommended rate, and then plus 40 pounds and plus 80 pounds. And then for the harvested beet plots, we just had the recommended rate, and then we had our checks in there. So if you're looking at the yield data there on bushels per acre, you can see that we do have an increase in our bushels per acre as we increase the nitrogen rate for the not harvested beet plots. However, if you just compare the harvested, which would be the recommended rate, and then the not harvested recommended rate, increased 27 bushels per acre just by not having the beets left out in the field. And that's very similar to our checks. where we didn't have any fertilizer applied, we saw an increase in 33 bushels per acre by just having the beets harvested. So again, we've done this trial 4 years now. Very different climates, but very similar results. Right, some of those years were extremely wet. Others we had perfect conditions. 21, drought, and last year was again a little different. Wet spring, really dry summer. However, like I said, the results are very similar. We're able to combine all these in analysis, and we'll actually have a report for all 4 seasons coming out here before too long. Across all the years, additional nitrogen generally was not able to overcome the tie-up of that additional carbon to the sugar beet crop. You weren't able to add enough nitrogen generally to produce a higher yield than you would have if the beet crop would have been removed and you applied a recommended rate of nitrogen. So with that, really the first option is to plant soybeans if that is economically possible in your rotation. However, that's not always possible. So if it's not, and you're going to be planting field corn, it'd be beneficial, according to this trial, to have a starter fertilizer and then have an additional 40 pounds of N applied over the recommended rate. You do not see a benefit from applying 8 pounds for 1 year out of the 4. So 40 pounds of additional N should be sufficient. So this did a nitrogen rate placement trial. We actually put it on 2 locations, one following soybean and another one following field corn. So last year, we put our nitrogen trials on these different previous crops of soybean and field corn to see if we can tease out any difference for a number of years. So we're looking at fertilizer guidelines for sugar beet production in our area. And we have treatments with increasing rates of broadcast. That's, with our nitrogen rate trials. But this year we added the placement 32% UAN, either in a 3x1 or a 3x0. So 3 inches the row and then 1 inch deep, or just dribbled on the surface. And then we had some other products, some like nitrogen fixing biological type products. And then we have our unit here that we use as a 360 banded, and then we use CO2 as a propellant for that product. You can kind of see the unit here. Sorry, it's not a great picture, but it worked pretty well, we thought, out in the field. We weren't sure with the first year how it was going to look, but it turned out pretty decent. May 24th, one of them was south of Renville, and the other one was north of Renville, a little ways. Also, jumping right into the yield data, these are our treatments here. We've got broadcast urea rates up through treatment 8. Then we have our placement treatments, the 3x1, 3x0 dribble, and then we've got some products that have been tested as well. We had a residual N test of about 45 pounds. So you can see our check is 0 applied, and then we have the residual. So we had increments of nitrogen applied, increments of 30, so going all the way up to 210. And so our total for our highest rate was 255 pounds total N. I'm not really going to get into these numbers too much because as you're looking at them, there's no significant differences. If there were, I'd have letters designating differences here. But you can see that going from the check 31.6 tons per acre up to 32.2 for the first increment of N. There's no difference there. You'll 31.7 for the next. It's just a little bit of noise, right? So we really have no statistical difference here. This is the site following soybean, harvested October 13th. For our other site following field corn, that was harvested on September 19th. You can see that the treatments aren't exactly the same. The reason we didn't have as many broadcast N rate treatments here is that we had another trial, a nitrogen rate trial, right next to this one. So you can see we have a few more placement treatments though, and another product there. Again, increments of 30 is what we're doing for the nitrogen rates, and then we have our total N here, and this one only goes up to 135. However, you can see again that there's no significant difference between these treatments for our sugar content or for the tons per acre. However, if you look at the check in the first increment of N here, you can see a numerical increase happening there. And that translates over to a significant difference for our ESA. So we had a nitrogen rate response for that first increment of N that we applied, that first 30 pounds. Drone image of orthorental as following soybean. You can see just we had 6 reps there. You can see a little bit of that wheat that we have planted between the reps. That's just the whole place that we take good care of the field. There's no response to nitrogen in these 2 trials, right, for 2022. A little bit of a response on the field corn compared to the soybean. So it's not, we cannot draw conclusions, and it would not be fair to draw conclusions about the impact of nitrogen placement for those products that we tested nitrogen. This is similar to results from previous studies. You guys have heard me talk about the nitrogen rate studies before, and we've had half of the studies that we conducted that we don't have a response to nitrogen to the sugar beet crop. You know, this is a frustrating thing to deal with, that we can't get a response to N, and we're looking at fields that have low residual N, you know, where we specifically search out those fields. So it is surprising that sometimes we just don't get a nitrogen response. Okay, last trial. So we have our sugar enhancement trial. I've talked about this trial probably other times here as well. It's something that we've been looking at the last 4 or 5 years, doing something like this. And no, we're not doing anything in the lab creating chemistry, just a full picture. So the point of this trial is to screen foliar nutrient or PGR type products for the ability to increase sugar content. This trial is planned on June 6th. So that is a little bit of a late planting day. I was up in the Clara City area though, and this year that was probably our latest planted area. Is really wet. Unfortunately, with the late planting and the warm temps there and how much moisture there was, we did have some app issues in the trial. The trial is, you know, it's intact, but some of the app has variability in the yield data, just so you know that. Harvested on September 30th. So this is our list of products that we tested for 2022. We have our control. This is planted in a field of a grower who he fertilized the whole field like he normally would for his sugar beet crop, and then we put our trial in. So this isn't a true check that doesn't have any N applied. It's treated the same as the grower's field. Our first 2 products were trinexapac ethyl. It's a plant growth regulator. And then we had some foliar nutrient type products. We got 4 through 7 here. And then we've got a proprietary product that we're testing on the PGR 8 through 12. And that's really just looking at different rates and different times. So looking at the yield data, I'll try to breeze through this. So the trinexapac ethyl, we saw a significant decrease in our sugar content. I mean, it dropped at 1.5% in the sugar. So probably not going to test that one again. That one doesn't look very good. For the next set of products, we can see that we have no difference in our sugar content here for those foliar nutrient type products. No difference from those compared to the check with 14% sugar. For the proprietary product that we're testing for content, you can see that we did have a significant increase on almost all those products. You know, we got 2.2% increase over the check for one of those treatments. We did see a decrease, right? So significant decrease. Again, the impact of app, I don't know. We'll see test this product again. But basically, between the increase in sugar and the decrease in tons, your ESA comes out constant again. Kind of trading one thing over there. Foliar nutrient products this year and other years, we don't provide a consistent increase. We haven't been able to consistently produce any increase in sugar. However, I do believe that plant growth regulators positively or negatively impact our sugar beets. Just think about, some herbicide plant growth regulators like 2,4-D. Obviously, you can have negative impacts, or like that trinexapac ethyl that we tested. However, I believe that there is a hope that we can find a PGR that we could increase sugar beet content without hindering tons as much as we did in this trial. So I think that there is some hope in doing that. So as I said earlier, full reports for all these trials discussed today, and also a lot of other trials that we don't have time to present everything today, will be available on the 2022 research report on the website, hopefully by the end of the week, but as soon as we can get that wrapped up. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Neil. If you got any questions, we're going to wait till after the whole presentation is done.
Okay, I'm Neil Olson, the production agronomist, and I'm going to talk about the data harvest trials. These started in 2011, and they've been ongoing ever since. They take place in 2 to 4 fields historically. And what we do is on a weekly basis, starting in August, and then ending in October, harvest a strip essentially, and collect the tear lab data on that. So this first chart is the extractable sugar per acre. This is the rate of gain per day for each year. I'll point that out. This is on the yearly scale here. So this is the same chart that you'll see, or you won't see the same chart. You'll see this on the table in the report. So I put it in the chart because sometimes that looks better. So this is in pounds of sugar per acre. So a fully canopied acre since 2011 has a long-term mean of 82 pounds of sugar per day. And what we'll end up focusing mostly on is going to be these last 2 years there as we go through the slides. The 21 was a record year for extractable sugar per acre, and 2022 was essentially near the mean. It's a little over the mean, but fairly near it. So obviously, quite obviously that the 2021 it got that high extractable sugar per acre by tons. This is the same format, tons per acre change per day. And the long-term mean is 0.22 tons. In 2022, last year, we had a high rate of sugar. Now, these are rates, so it doesn't necessarily mean the total's higher or lower. It just means it accumulated much faster than normal. And we will look at that closer in some of these charts. The acre for the last 2 years were higher than the long-term average. But when you stack those two together and look at it, you can see 2021 is still good. And if we look at the acre for those same 2 years, again, these were both typically higher than the long-term. But obviously, we saw a lot better response, larger response in 2021. I'll point out too, these dates aren't exactly stacked. There's plus or minus a day or two on that, just because of how the timing worked out from one year to another year. And then last year, we looked at sugar and difference going on. So when you have a high rate of gain in sugar, but as you see, we get up here and it was a high rate because we have started out with a really low rate, or low number here. And the rate of gain was good. This rate of gain was lower than the average by quite a bit. The reason why I wanted to look at these two years in particular was because, well, first of all, the recent very different. We had high extractable sugar per acre on both of these years. Did because of tons, the other did it because of sugar. And compare that to one of the reasons why we do the data harvest study is go over the pre-file payment. So in this chart, I highlighted the 100. That is 100% of what the data harvest yield would have been at the first day of cane harvest. This is 2021 without the pre-file payment. And then the blue here is 2022 without the pre-file payment. And you can see they're considerably lower than that 100% mark. With the pre-file payment, they do get above or at or above the 100%, which is the goal. And 2021 has more dates on this because it had a longer pre-file. 2022 did not have as long as pre-file. So once we get to main harvest, that's when things get to 100 because you're not getting pre-file. There's not a pre-file payment at main harvest, so that these values just kind of get cut off at 100% there. So I wanted to put both those years together, given the fact that they were different. They're both very good, or not. They're both good years in terms of extractable sugar. They got there by different ways, and the current calculator that we have has been able to get both of those accounted for so that the pre-file payment isn't lower than the main harvest payment. And that was all I had to point out for this. I'll turn it over to Mark here.
Mark Bloomquist, I'm the research director at Southern Bend. But I also want to work with our agricultural staff out at Brawley. So I just want to do a really brief update on some of our projects out at Brawley that we're working on. So first is to show the Spreckels growing area. The Imperial. The diagrams that you see on our location, 3 sugar beet fields out in the valley. We also have 15 different research trials conducted out there on 5 different trial sites. The red stars would be our late harvest official variety trial sites. The yellow stars are our early harvest official variety trial sites. And then here, this black star is the Imperial Valley Research Center. It's a private research farm, formerly a USDA facility out there. They rent to various companies, small plot research areas to do seed increases or to conduct research trials on different crops. And we have a couple trials out there. The Brawley factory would be located right about here for your reference. A little bit about the production cycle in Brawley. It is completely opposite of the production cycle of anywhere else in the U.S. that's raising sugar beets. We're planting our beets out there here, and it's warming. And we have salt content in these soil. You can see the white. The production system out there generally is irrigation, so water is running down the burrow here, and we're wicking the salt in pictures and salty soil for difficult, right? And our beets are harvested in April through July. It's like a 4-month pre-pile that you experience here. That's what we do every day out there. We harvest only the beets that we're going to process that day. We have 8 to 18 hours of beets on hand at any one time to operate the factory at about 9,500 tons per day. And the temperatures get warm. By the time we get to our late June, July timeframe, it's above 100 every day. Oftentimes it's above 110 every day. And that causes some issues with late rot complex. Our research priorities out there right now are to increase our emergence and evenness of that emergence. Hopefully we can make that into a yield benefit. We want to reduce our late rust potential on the biomass field. We have a couple of ideas that we're working on, and we're screening varieties. Just to give you an idea here of production system out there. Here's the canal delivering water to the field. The growers then build these basins. The water from the canal goes into these basins. Down the rows, you pipe in tubes or you pipe the walls of that basin. So one of the ways we're looking at increasing that emergence is if we do something with sprinkler irrigation to increase the emergence. Some growers started putting sprinklers on some of their early harvest, early planted fields. So we can sprinkler that, pushing the salt away from the seed zone, wicking it up. And if we can get that stand better, quicker, can we get to yield? You have to consider it 40-foot long irrigation pipe, right? And the fields are 50. We're putting the irrigation pipe out every 40 feet. You can imagine the labor involved in doing that. And the cost is substantial. It's $200 to $400 an acre to install this sprinkler pipe and take it back out. The emergence and compare the emergence basis of growers and irrigated, and we get weekly yields during harvest. On a long pre-pile harvest period, every week on Monday, the agricultural system can measure the acreage of the partially harvested field, give us a weekly yield on every field. Weekly yields. This is just our 2021 data on this project, our different week ending dates here. We had 7 dates that year where we had yields harvested each week to compare. Then this is the advantage of sprinkler versus furrow irrigation and pounds of extractable sugar per acre. And you can see it's they're up and down. Well, this is database data. We don't control any of the variables. We don't control the planting dates, the varieties. But the optimistic thing is that in every week, our sprinkler irrigated fields out yielded the furrow irrigated fields. So that's one way we're looking at the data, but we're also putting in a research trial on the Imperial Valley Research Center where we can compare the furrow irrigation versus sprinkler. The water is being applied in the same day. So we have 12 rows of furrow irrigation. We have a buffer area here so we don't throw water from one treatment to the other. Then a sprinkler generated area over here. Again, a picture of that emergence coming up with our sprinkler pipe. So between those two projects, we're looking at what's the return there, and if we can pay for that sprinkler pipe and get a better crop, get more even stand. Next is our late rot management. Late rot is complex. The two main culprits there. High temperatures, saturated soils, right? So we furrow irrigate down the furrows, and it's very warm. So we end up with the conditions that drive late rot on these fields. So this is a field from a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, that ended up getting abandoned out there. We abandoned 200 to 400 acres a year because there's just no economic beet production left in them. And when this late rot starts moving in on growers' fields, one of the practices, so when their purity and their sugar contents drop below a certain level, one of the practices are after defoliation, they bring a crew in and they manually remove all the rot beet to allow it to be harvested. 65, 70 I know of it, so it's still very labor. Ways to reduce that risk. More efficient. Plots, you can see the difference in resistance between varieties. The late rot, 2 different years, 2 different trials that help us in that. But varieties aren't the only answer there, because irrigation management is really important too. So there are a few growers that have started putting sprinkler pipe back in fields at the end of the year to see if we can reduce that late rot potential, because we're not running water down the furrows in. We have a little better control of how saturated we get things. But it's limited to the field that's been tried on. So we also put a trial in Imperial Valley. This is a picture from 30 days ago. We're going to carry that forward into May. May, we're going to take every other strip and put the sprinkler pipe back in it. So we have 3 sprinkler, 3 furrow strips, and we're going to take the end of it. We have a susceptible resistant variety planted in here. Quantify the benefits of both in a sprinkler irrigated end of the year. And we're also doing variety trials up there. This is a picture of the trial, one of the trials from last year, and we have a palm tree in the background. So I'm pretty sure we're the only growing next to sugar beet. So it probably tells us we probably need to look at different varieties from the other parts of the country that will be successful in Imperial Valley. So we're screening varieties. We have 2 early harvest OBTs planted in September, harvested in April. There's really less disease risk at that time. So it's all about yield and sugar content early part of the season. Our late harvest OBTs are planted a little bit later, harvested in that late June, July, really warm months. And it's about disease management and yield at that time. We're also doing proprietary trials out there for KWS and SES at all these sites. We are the only entity doing trial work in the Imperial Valley for sugar beets on varieties right now. There's one at the University of California footprint out there on a couple of projects for research that's going on. So Joaquin started as a research agronomist for job force out there. He's got a lot of experience over the years. He is the man that is taking care of these sites and putting all these, doing all the day-to-day activities on the sites and maintaining them super condition. Dmitry Boratinsky is our ag manager out there, supporting our research efforts, and he would also be in charge of the whole ag operation out there. If you find yourself in Imperial Valley, he'd be a good resource if you're going to talk to